Thank you all for coming today. I want to start out this morning by introducing those that stand with me. To my far right, left, and your right, and who you are.
Matthew Makepeace with the SVU unit at Wayne County Prosecutors.
Tina Ripley with the SVU unit at Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
Matt and Tina will be trying the case.
And good morning, Louisa Papelis. I'm also with the Special Victims Unit, the Deputy Chief.
And good morning, Kelly Gleason. I'm the Chief of the Special Victims Unit.
Good morning, Chief White.
Good morning, Lieutenant Amber Roberson, Homicide, Missing Person.
Sergeant Shannon Jones, Homicide, Missing Person.
Thank you. I have spent decades of my career looking at pictures of murdered people. When I was trying homicide cases for 6 straight years as an assistant prosecutor, I would spend hours thinking about the victim whose case I was getting ready to try, wondering how they spent their last weeks, their last days, their last hours, and their last minutes of their lives. What were they thinking about? Did they know that the end was near? And if it was someone they knew, what must they have been thinking as they were shot, stabbed, or whatever mechanism of death was used and confronted them with by the person they knew or loved? I can't imagine the thought that goes through their minds. But it's always, always 1,000 times worse when the person is a child or a baby, someone in the dawn of their lives who have begun to live their lives. The picture behind me is of Zanaya, and that will always be haunting because it was taken just a short time before the evidence shows that she was never seen or heard from again. It was taken by Nazaya herself, a selfie. That's the last known picture that we know about of her. And it was pointed out to me by one of the detectives on this case and by one of the prosecutors. She is smiling and waving and saying hello. But little did she know that she was really saying goodbye. We will provide to you later a very skeleton timeline of the time right before her death, before and after. Of course, the detail would be provided in court. The evidence shows overwhelmingly in this case that she is in fact deceased. The last time she was seen alive was January the 9th of this year, 2024, almost 9 months ago. Her missing status was reported to the Detroit Public School Police Department by her grandmother on that very day when she never returned home from school. And again, that was January the 9th of 2024. In early February of 2024, the case was turned over to the Detroit Police Department. Frankly, that should have happened right away, but they began investigating immediately. The evidence would further show that through text messages that we know and that we have, Zanaya and this defendant were going to meet after school on January the 9th. We know that she did indeed meet up with the defendant that we're charging in this case. We also know that several people close to Mr. Butts, who we were charging later, saw them together in several different locations, people that he knew well. We have evidence that at 9:30 p.m. on that day, that Mr. Butts checked into a motel and that Zanaya was never seen or heard from again. Not from her family, not from her schoolmates, not from her friends, not from social media where she was extremely active with her friends, not from teachers, no one. We know that she had no medical conditions that would cause a life-threatening medical emergency to her. And he, again, was the last person that saw her alive. She would have turned 14 years old just 10 days ago on September the 16th of 2024. And again, no one has seen or heard from her. You look at that face, and you do not see the horrors that she had gone through in her short life. The exploitation, the molestations, the sexual abuse, and the pregnancy that she was concealing. The evidence will show that from one of her text messages to and with Jarvis Butts. And we also know, the evidence will show, that there's no evidence of anyone else being the father of that child other than the defendant himself, who we charge today. And he knew she was pregnant. We know that he was also searching for ways to abort the baby. We know that sexually explicit photos were requested by him of her and that she complied and sent them to her. All at the hands, we allege, the man we are charging with her death and also her long-term sexual abuse. In our warrant review process that Matt and Tina and others put together, excellent work on that. Video of 111 gigabytes, witnesses and witness statements, body-worn camera, and let me not forget, it was Tina and Matt's memo, but the work of the Detroit Police Department. Anyway, we reviewed 111 gigabytes of video, witnesses and witness statements, body-worn camera footage, surveillance video, police reports, documents, 19 gigabytes, medical records, search warrant returns, phone extractions, which came to 506 gigabytes. Today we are charging Jarvis Butts with 1 count of first-degree premeditated murder, 1 count of criminal sexual conduct in the second degree, and 1 count of child sexually abusive material. Today we are also charging Mr. Butts with more counts of criminal sexual conduct on 2 more girls, yes, girls, on 2 other separate cases. The girls in question now are 20 and 11 respectively today, but both were under the age of 13 years old at the time the offenses occurred that we're charging. We are charging that one victim who is now 20 years old, that from April of 2012 to April of 2014, it's alleged that defendant Butts sexually assaulted the victim at a residence in Detroit. Further facts and evidence on that matter will be placed on the record at the preliminary examination. In that case, we charge Mr. Butts with criminal sexual conduct, 1 count in the first degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older. In that case, we are also charging Mr. Butts with 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct in the second degree, person under 13, defendant 17 years or older. In the second criminal sexual conduct case, well, I guess the third, that we're charging today, we are alleging that the victim, who is now 13 years old, that from July 2015 through July 2017, we're alleging that he sexually assaulted the victim at a residence in Detroit, and again, further facts and evidence will be developed at the preliminary examination. Defendant Butts have been charged with, in that case, 1 count of criminal sexual conduct in the second degree. Child under the age of 13, Mr. Butts over the age of 17. Based on all the evidence that I've laid out now and much more that will be shown later in court, based on all these cases we will present in court, Mr. Butts targeted and befriended women who had to have sexual relationships with their young daughters. He would have relationships with their mothers, but his true desire was to have sex with their young daughters. That's what the evidence will show. He was a classic and expert groomer and pedophile. It's incredibly sad, incredibly unspeakable, and we want to bring justice to her and her family. I have to take this moment to say something to you. And this is not directed at all at Nazia's family, who by all accounts had many in her family that truly loved her. This is directed to everyone else listening to me now. We must be very careful who we let into our hearts and our homes and our lives, especially if you have children. We must be very careful who we have around our children and elders respectively. We must also be very careful who we leave our children with, even if they are in relationship partners, family, and friends. I'll say that again. Even if they are relationship partners, families, or friends. Life can be hard enough at times, but when it comes to our children, we must be deliberative, we must be diligent, and laser focused on their safety. And sometimes we must make decisions about them and their lives that we may not like and that they may not like, but it's for the betterment of them and their safety and their future. When something doesn't feel right, even if it's just that voice in your head, it usually isn't right. And sometimes when we are attentive and we do everything right by our children, things can still happen and still go very wrong despite our best efforts. This can happen to good watchers of children. But we must always ask ourselves at the end of each and every day, was I right by each member of my household in terms of their safety? Did I do right by my children? Now, of course, Mr. Butts is presumed innocent unless and until he's found guilty on each and every crime and count that we have charged today. We have been told this morning that the arraignment will be tomorrow, we think at 10:30 a.m. in the morning, but we don't have confirmation of that yet. But the arraignment, we are told, will happen tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. Chief? I'll sit with you.
Good morning. This is one of the most difficult cases that I have been a part of, and I'm just so very thankful to the detectives and the investigators in homicide. The tragedies that happened to this little girl touches each and every one of us, and unfortunately, she lost her life at the hands of someone who should have been concerned about her safety. I just want to take a couple moments and thank Madam Prosecutor and her team for the amazing work, the commitment, the hours that they put into this work. I want to thank our major crimes, missing persons, homicide, specifically Sergeant Jones and Lieutenant Amber Roberson. When I tell you the days and hours and the tenacity that they put into this work, it's not often that I'm not surprised by our officers, but when I saw the work and the hours and the time that they put in there, I was absolutely in awe at my weekly briefings and the time that they put into this case. It is not an 8-hour-a-day job. It is it ends when they have to get a couple hours of sleep. And I will tell you, with all the other things going on, this case was always top of mind. Certainly want to thank DPS for their assistance in transferring over some of the information that we were able to get from them with this case. There were a number of people, our community in particular, even our Board of Police Commissioner, Tamara Liberty Smith, who was out knocking on doors and passing out flyers, all with the desire to bring this little girl home to her family. Quickly, as the investigation unfolded, the officers realized that was going to be very difficult. Without going into great detail, I will tell you, as the prosecutors indicated, hours and hours and many gigabytes of information and phone records and knocking on doors and pulling video went into this investigation. And sadly, we find ourselves where we are now. But if there's any solace in any of this, is that we take a lesson from this. We make strong and good decisions for our children, keep them out of harm's way. We are not pointing out anything that someone did wrong. We just want to make sure people do a lot more things right. And again, Madam Prosecutor, thank you and your team for the work.
All right, the Chief and I will take a few questions, if you have any.
I have one. How did Jarvis Butts have access to Mosiah?
He knew some of their family members, some of her family members.
Can you talk about the time frame when you mentioned grooming? Are you able to elaborate at all over how long of a period of time he may have quote unquote groomed or knew her, or
All I can and will say at this point that it started in 2022.
So just for accuracy, this little girl's remains have never been found?
No,
Is there a thought,
her body has never been found.
any thought of where she may be?
Well, if we knew that, we would certainly have a case that we weren't trying. We were trying without a body.
And Rigas, can you say what triggered charges now?
Again, there's an incredible amount of material, and one of the reasons why lately I've been giving out amounts of material that we've been going through, because I think people sometimes just do not get it or understand about all the work that it takes by the investigators and by the prosecutors to put a case like this together. Whenever you have a case like this, where there has been no body found, it makes it more difficult and much more investigation must be done because we have to be able to prove that the person is deceased.
are you able to say how long this suspect was on your radar, or when you really started locking in on him?
No, by law, I can't really comment on that because that would leave me in a place where I can't talk about right now.
Could things have maybe moved forward a little faster if the school police had got with Detroit police right away?
Yes.
Can you talk a little more about?
No, I better not. I have strong opinions there.
You added to that the evidence, however, suggests that Mosiah Harris is dead, correct?
We are going to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she's dead, as we must do by law.
You can't say why at this time?
Because no one's seen her, no friends, no family, no teachers, no medical conditions. Even on her birthday, 10 days ago, she contacted no one. This was a child that never missed school, but the school hasn't seen or heard from at all again. This is a young girl who was very active on social media, and crickets, nothing, since January the 9th of 2024.
Anything from the defendant?
And we have other things too that will come out in court.
Any cooperation at all, or utterances, statements from the defendant?
I can't get into that.
Without being able to speak in detail, I'm sure, do you have any evidence to indicate manner and location of death, or where this might have occurred?
No, because we can't do that unless we have a body.
Mr. Butts is currently facing charges in prosecutor by your office. Can you talk additional charges before these? Can you talk about those at all?
He is, and we next appear in court on Monday, January 30th.
Have there been any other arrests made in this case?
I don't think so.
We just saw an unfounded rumor that there were family members arrested. Didn't know if you could squash that or confirm that.
It's an unfounded rumor. It's not true.
Thank you.
Do you have an idea of how long Messiah may have been being molested?
Again, the sexual abuse began based on the evidence that we have in 2022. Or at least the grooming began in 2022.
Are you able to say how far along she was on her pregnancy?
We don't know because we don't have a body.
I have a question for Chief White just about missing children just broadly. When these types of cases happen, obviously we get the reports all the time of missing children. Can you talk about what you think didn't work in this case? You know, in terms of like maybe the seriousness that was considered when she first went missing according to BPSD, CD versus what's got to you guys?
I would much rather have had the case earlier. I don't know if the outcome would have been any different based on some of the things we've learned in the course of the investigation, but we may have had an opportunity to recover even more evidence. But we're pretty confident that the evidence that we have is strong. We know it is, in fact. But you can never have enough evidence. So if there's anything that could have gone a little bit better with regards to the first time that we were brought in, I would have wanted to be brought in much earlier for that reason.
Just some background on Jarvis Butts. What's his age and is he from Detroit?
He's 41 years old from Highland Park, I believe.
Yeah.
And Chief, as soon as you guys got word of this, you guys were out immediately, right? And you were even out searching. You guys set up a command post.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we took over the case after we were briefed. We took charge of the case, and our teams got engaged in it immediately and hit the ground running and didn't look back.
Can you talk about, Chief White, or maybe Sergeant Jones, the Maziah's case in connection to the other missing young people, girls, children, like what your workload looks like, how you balance those cases, and are able to, the numbers of youth that are missing right now?
Yeah, well, we make that public. We put it on our social media pages. There's a number of misinformation, misconceptions about missings. Oftentimes what we have is kids that run away for a day or two. They have a way of investigating these cases. They know the ones that routine runaways, if you will. They still look, they still go out, but there's ways to do it, going to the schools, social media with kids. It's a big benefit to us for our investigations. And they also know when they become serious missings. All missings are serious, but internally there's a title that has been elevated to a serious missing, and that involves a lot more work and connection with the family. Each time we get a call, we go out to the home, regardless of whether or not it's a person who has run away or a routine runaway or serious missing. We check the home. We have found kids in the home hiding. So it's really complex, and we'll take its own news conference to explain it. I will tell you this, they do a very good job. We've got thousands of kids this year that have been returned home, many of which were runaways, so we don't have a condition where kids are being picked up on the street and kidnapped. We did have an incident a couple years ago where that happened, and the prosecutor charged that person. In fact, it was just recently convicted. So it's a lot that goes into it. We'd be more than happy to sit down and explain our process with you if you want to do something on an aside.
Chief, assuming then, inferring that investigators knew early on this was not a runaway case, or just if you can share some details of the fact that I'm assuming you knew pretty quickly this was not what she did as far as running and there was some foul play involved, and if you can address the complexities that the prosecutor alluded to of not having a body and how you build a case around that. Well,
the prosecutor builds cases. We bring evidence to the prosecutor. We bring our investigation, and she makes the charging decision. So I don't want to get into that lane because it's not mine. I'll tell you, as I said earlier, and the prosecutor has alluded to a lot, and there's a lot in the press release as to what goes into it. These folks looking at hours and hours of video evidence, and as the prosecutor indicated earlier, I don't think people recognize in this new age of modern technology what that has done to investigative process. The days of old school investigations, some of that stuff still is valid and important. You got to get out on the street, knock on doors, and talk to people. But what the digital world has brought us is new opportunities to find additional information and the cadence in which people communicate, right? Every one of us have these things in our pocket called cell phones that we use for everything. And if people go dark, and they've never been dark, and particularly kids, they show their food, they show their school, They take selfies, and when that stops, that elevates your concern as to why did it stop. So it's a very complex process. These are the experts. I'm just the chief. But, again, we can sit down and talk to you about it in great detail, but a lot goes into it. And when you're talking about 111 gigabytes of information and text messages and dumping phones and literally going through methodically each one of the pages and the text messages and the communication as to when they stopped and the last word said that should have prompted a response. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I can't get into that. All those things elevate your curiosity and brings you into other areas. So it takes a lot more time, but when you get it all right and you pull all the things together, you become as confident as we are now with this case. And we're very, very, very happy that this predator, this child predator, will not be able to hurt any more children and frankly, any more women, because we know that the women were a pathway to the children. That's that, period. And I'm going to stop there before I get in trouble with the prosecutor. All right.
506 gigabytes just from the cell phones.
Are there any other people that are close to her family that may be charged? Or?
This investigation's over, and we have charged the one single person that's responsible for not only her death, the evidence show, but also for the sexual assaults that we have charged today.
And what are his priors? Do we have those?
Oh, I definitely can't go there. I'll lose my law license.
Chief, some of Naziah's relatives said they previously had talked to CPS about allegations of sexual abuse for Naziah and other kids. Did that ever make it to your office? Is that something that police have investigated before?
Yeah, let me just say this, that if anyone that is watching this press conference right now or reads any of the coverage that I'm sure that you will give this, has any reason to believe that they were a victim of his or that they know something else, we certainly welcome them to contact the Detroit Police Department.
So you can't say if there were any previous reports on that?
No.
Has Mr. Butts made any admissions at all?
We can't talk about that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.